Cottagecore is the name given to a particular internet subculture of pictures, videos, fashion, and blog posts. The aesthetic evokes a romanticized pastoral life. Floral patterns, woodland creatures, nostalgic faded photos, and simple activities like baking and sewing are all omnipresent in cottagecore. Is the popularity of this subculture evidence of a widespread desire for degrowth? Or is it just a shallow affinity for the aesthetics of simple living, never amounting to more than time spent looking at pictures of cottages on a screen? On today's episode of the Environmental Podcast, we will discuss cottagecore's history, future, and the psychological facets that drive it.
Yes, we will. Thanks for that lovely introduction, Alicia. We discovered cottagecore, a couple weeks ago?
Yes.
And we just said we have to do an episode on this because it aligns neatly with our ideals in some ways and then differs in other ways. And we thought that it would be interesting to discuss the things we agree with and the things we disagree with, as well as its history.
Yes.
And for those of you who are still kind of wondering what is cottagecore, we'll get a little bit into it later, but I thought this would be a funny way to start because I found this bingo sheet online, which was a cottagecore bingo, and it has 16 things which kind of characterize cottagecore's aesthetic, and I'll list them off. Tea. Loves to read. Animals. Loves bees. Loves honey. Yellow. Wants to live in the countryside. Thinks nature is the most amazing thing. Floral patterns. Enjoys gardening. Soft. Still writes letters to people. Enjoys going on picnics. Fruits. Owns plants. And thinks cows are adorable. And the bingo page is kind of decorated with little drawings of frogs and fairies and a frog with a bow on it, sitting on top of a mushroom, and some teddy bears. And so I sent that to Alicia and I said, here, this is what cottagecore is. And how many of those did you get?
I think all but 2.
Yeah.
I crossed off.
You were I think it was all of them, actually.
Yeah.
And then a couple of them you crossed off a few times.
Things such as has plants.
Yeah, just to emphasize it.
Yeah.
So you kind of discovered that, hey, you're maybe not so unique after all.
Yeah, exactly. I realized that I'm insignificant in the world and it's all just a void.
The same thing happened to me a couple of years ago. Remember when we discovered there was a whole genre of
British football-loving chess players.
of English young 20-something men who make YouTube videos about either chess, football, soccer, or movies or video games. Yes. And I thought, well, great. I'm nothing. I'm just a worse version of all these other people. So it's never fun to learn about that.
Yeah, it is. Because then you realize,
I'm not alone.
And then you can maybe chat to these people, learn about why they love these things, and have some relationships, figure out what's different, what's similar.
So you're saying that you're a part of the cottagecore community now?
I've never reached out to anybody to talk to. I've just kind of dissected the entire aesthetic.
No, I dipped my toe in a more objective outsider perspective when I was researching for this episode, right?
Exactly.
So cottagecore, also known as farmcore, grandmacore, and I think there are some other names for it.
Yeah.
But we're just using cottagecore as a kind of catch-all term just for the sake of brevity. For the people who don't spend so much time on the internet, it's called an aesthetic. And that means that it's basically a little community, usually on a website, a social media website like Tumblr, maybe Instagram, maybe Twitter, or some other kind of smaller art website. And people just go on it and kind of reblog or retweet or share pictures or, what would you say, captions, like writing or videos, which suit the aesthetic.
Yeah, so in this case, you say you would go on to, Reddit, and there'd be a lot of pictures of cottages, farm animals, and then people would be swapping recipes, swapping tips on how to knit, so on. And
in this way, the aesthetic is curated and sometimes grows and sometimes even becomes pretty mainstream.
Yeah.
So I was going on the aesthetics wiki, which is a whole Wikipedia database listing various aesthetics. And so some of the bigger ones that people might know are streetwear and steampunk, which became pretty big. Yeah. And then some of the more obscure ones I found were called Worm Time.
Worm Time.
Yeah, also known as Wormcore, which is about toy worms.
Okay.
Like fuzzy ones. Lava Punk.
Okay.
And Simpson Wave.
Interesting.
Which we have a little bit of experience with. And Cottagecore, I guess, is somewhere between steampunk and Simpson Wave in popularity.
Yeah, and we think it's on the rise because...
It is on the rise.
There was actually at the beginning of the year, Architectural Digest as like, these are the trends for design this year.
Mm-hmm.
And one of them was called Vintage Maximalism, which is essentially cottagecore. It's just loving like knickknacks, farm life, simple living. And so they said this is the biggest trend in design this year.
You mean in decor and in housing?
Mm-hmm.
That's very interesting because I looked on the Google search database to see just how many searches it had, and it was peaking. It started tracking it around 2018, and now it's been peaking in March and April and February of this year. I mean, I think there are some reasons for that. I think quarantine has probably helped that along a little bit because people are trapped inside more.
Yeah, unable to get out and connect with the physical world.
Yeah, so the myth of cottagecore only grows.
Yes. I was thinking about like how quarantine would impact this aesthetic and the lifestyle, I guess, associated with it. And I think it's going to definitely keep growing. And the reason I think that is because it's very escapist, is how a lot of people describe it.
Right.
So it's escaping into this world, which seems quite ideal.
Mm-hmm.
On the internet, though, instead of in the physical world, which is what we kind of, our goal is to create a world which is a bit more, you're more connected with your work, the things you're doing. But this is a very internet-based community.
So do you think that's ironic?
I think so. Because when we've been kind of struggling with finding places to share a podcast on the internet.
Right, because it's kind of, if they're on the internet and they're spending all the time on internet, or if there's a social media community, it probably isn't about the negatives of the internet and social media communities. Yeah.
So it's hard, and our goal was to, like initially our goal was to spread the podcast via posters, speaking at events, like physical things. But then lately we haven't been able to do that, and we've been relying a bit more on the internet. And of course we want to spread it on the internet because we have to go to the people who are on the internet and say, hey, take a look at what you're doing.
Hey, get off the internet.
Yeah.
I also think it's coincided with the release of Animal Crossing for the Switch.
I think so. That's true.
Animal Crossing is a very idealized, escapist game. And the newer one, you're literally on a desert island and you're just doing wholesome things like digging up weeds and planting flowers and talking to your neighbors who are also all these kind of anthropomorphized animals. Mm-hmm. So I think there's a strong overlap there.
Yeah, I believe so. Because that was released a month or two ago?
No, just a couple of weeks ago.
Oh, okay. So that was the newest one. Then it was first released in 2001, right? For the DS, or was it a Wii game?
Why are we getting into the history of Animal Crossing?
I don't know, I'm just curious.
That came out in, the first one was called for the GameCube. 2001 sounds about right, yeah.
I don't think it's a super new thing. I think the naming and the
Cottagecore,
gathering of people is new, but...
Well, this is what we can get into. Is it just kind of the newest manifestation of some kind of subconscious need to live a real life? Mm-hmm. Or is it just like a shallow appreciation for the aesthetics of cottages and floral prints? Because the cynic in me would say it's just the latter.
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about it the last few days. And I think it's authentic. I think it's a manifestation of kind of minimalism, which you're not a fan of, like capital M minimalism, but I think it's a similar vibe to that. It's trying to find an appreciation for the mundane, the things that you already have, because I imagine a lot of other aesthetics are usually new things. You want like things to be shiny, but with cottagecore it's more just like vintage doilies and
but it's still that's still a material kind of obsession, I would say.
Yeah, that's true.
So that's why I tend to lean towards that people are more into the looks of cottages and old fabrics and things than they are the actual kind of lifestyle that those things go along with, which is getting off the internet and simpler living and things like that. But it's a discussion to be had, definitely. So yeah, Cottagecore existed on Tumblr for a while, and now it seems to be kind of blowing up a little bit more on Instagram.
Yeah.
And I found when I was looking at the search history of it on Google, the related searches are clothing, bedroom, and wallpaper for one's computer. So those are still kind of material things.
Yeah, it's not like recipes.
No.
How to knit.
No.
Yeah.
But also Google wouldn't really track those things.
That's true. I was kind of wondering, because I think this is definitely a very internet-based thing, but I wonder if it could become more of a lifestyle thing. These communities are like, hey, we're going to take like a month-long internet fast as a group, go away and come back. Like, I wonder if it could manifest in the physical world, because I think that'd be beneficial.
Hopefully people will get there.
Yeah.
Hopefully people will get there. It's mostly young people. I was looking at it's taking over TikTok a little bit.
Yeah.
And all those videos were people describing their ideal fantasy, which was, I want to live in the woods and just do this and this and this. And some of them had been interviewed for this article I was reading, and they were all saying, yeah, I live in Florida right now, but my goal somewhere once I grow up is to be able to move to somewhere more in the woods so I can connect more with nature and things like that. So there's something genuine there with some people, but I still think a lot of other people are maybe just hopping on it because they like old dresses or something like that. Because it's kind of a trade-off. It's like, well, okay, you can live like this, but you can't be on the internet anymore looking at pictures like this.
Yeah, exactly. You need to make this life for yourself.
But I just think for most people it doesn't extend beyond a simple escapist fantasy.
Yeah, I think so. I was kind of thinking about minimalism and how that's also very escapist, because whenever I hear people on YouTube or whatever, like there's the minimalists, they have a podcast and stuff.
Right.
It's a very egocentric lifestyle. Like, I feel like they're very focused on themselves and saying, well, I own 50 things, and it's often associated with a desire to help the environment and kind of lower the impacts of capitalism on the environment and on society. And on, like, even they often talk about the mental health benefits of owning fewer things, which I can totally get on board with. But then it doesn't usually extend upon that, or like extend beyond to that. It's not saying, okay, this is a great way of life, I'm going to go advocate for policy changes. You know what I mean?
No.
Like, it's just, I feel like they're escaping, and they like get into this world and they only talk to fellow minimalists. It's not a...
My criticism with minimalism is just seems so insular and self-congratulatory, which is why everyone uses it as a label, as something to be proud of, kind of like people who do CrossFit or something like that. It's like, oh, well, you know, I'm a minimalist. I don't have many things. It's like, okay, you don't have many things. I don't think that deserves its own title, it to be a thing. Like, that kind of annoys me. And also because, again, it seems like a more shallow aesthetic thing more than any kind of sweeping lifestyle change. I think it's like, look, I have an empty living room, but I still spend 6 hours a day online. I don't call that minimalism.
Yeah.
That's just me, though.
That's kind of what I was trying to get at. I was just thinking both cottagecore and minimalism are like these philosophies that like kind of encompass people's lives, but in reality they're just an aesthetic, or they're just it's just how you decorate your home, or the
decoration is a good word. It's essentially how you decorate your life and how you create your own, what would you say, personality online, like in the bio. Yeah,
it's a very internet-based thing.
Yes.
Because I'm sure for all of history there's been minimalists, like people that just don't have a lot of that stuff. Yeah. That's all it needs to be, though. Yeah, I don't think it needs to be this like community of like, these are all the benefits, these are, I don't know. The thing with cottagecore is that it advocating or romanticizing a life which is wildly different from a normal one. Most people aren't in the woods. It's not easy to quickly switch to cottagecore or try the cottagecore challenge for 30 days as it is with minimalism. So that's why I think it's slightly different. Yeah. I saw a few of the cottagecore advocates online, or like the people that are really like living the cottagecore life. They probably already lived on farms or whatever, then just started sharing. But they wouldn't be sharing if they were really living the cottagecore life, is the thing. That's true. So that's like the paradox at the heart of it. Yeah. It's like if you were really, really into simple living, you wouldn't be on the internet. But that's the exact same thing with our podcast that we've kind of struggled with. Yeah. But we just, what would you say, clench your teeth and have to do the Instagram stuff anyway. Yeah, because our goal is to get people to realize what they're doing and get off. It's like we want people to listen, and we want that kind of message to spread. But my screen time's gone up several hours since I started the podcast, and that bothers me quite a lot. Yeah, we're working on a system to get that down. We're working on kind of shifts so that we can go days without the internet. But I was going to say something. So these people that are like really into the cottagecore, one of them said, this is what made me relate it so much to minimalism, is that there's not a lot of stuff you can do wrong in like the cottagecore life. You're baking, you're reading, like you can't really mess up. Right. Whereas I feel like with a lot of other aesthetics, there are other other lifestyles is easy to mess up.
What do you mean?
Like with minimalism, I feel like it'd be, if you own too many things, you've messed up.
It's more judgmental, you mean?
More judgmental, yeah. It's a very judgment-free...
Yeah. Escape.
Yeah.
That's the whole point. It's all things soft, all things cute baby animals, all things, you know, freshly baked bread, and none of it ever burns or anything like that.
Yeah.
I never see anyone having to do any kind of hard work which would go along with that kind of farm lifestyle. You know, they're always, for instance, they're always picking fruit from the trees, but they're never planting the trees, or they're never watering anything. Things like that. But I mean, that's fine because it's just an escape. It doesn't need to be
super realistic. Yeah.
But the question is, would people take all that nice stuff if they had to do the other stuff?
I don't know.
I don't know either. It reminds me of the Studio Ghibli movies a lot because those are similar. They always show the nice aspects of living.
Yeah, so it's like taking
living.
The bread out of the oven, going for a walk with your family through the woods.
And the other thing, the note that I made that connects both of those, the Studio Ghibli movies such as, let's say, Spirited Away and My Neighbor Totoro especially, with this kind of cottagecore aesthetic, is that they both have magic.
Yeah.
Like explicitly magical creatures in cottagecore. It's all these kind of magical toads and fairies, woodland creatures, woodland sprites. And those are also trends in Studio Ghibli movies, usually based in Japanese folklore, but similar kind of rural mythology. And I remember asking you a couple of years ago, maybe, would those movies be as good? Would they achieve the same effect if they didn't have that kind of magical element?
Do you remember what I said?
I don't remember what you said.
I don't remember either. I don't think they would.
You don't think you think the magic is kind of essential to it?
I think so. I mean, I would probably love them just as much without the magic, just because the visuals are so nice and the stories could go on with it. The actual magic could just be the kids imagining it or whatever.
Right.
Yeah, I think it could still work, but I don't think it would be as widespread, just because it just adds this element of, it makes you wonder, which I think people need to do more. I think it entices people. I think
it's some kind of more childlike, a yearning for when things weren't so set in stone, for when we didn't know so much about everything, maybe, when we didn't have the internet. And also it's just a general simple nostalgia for when I was a kid. I think that's definitely what makes people like the Studio Ghibli movies so much, because it's a simpler time. The protagonists are always children. And in Cottagecore as well, we noticed the kind of weird trend is that the people are often dressing up and wearing makeup that makes them look younger. Yeah,
I made a note about that because that was one thing that just put me off. I was just like, this seems wrong.
Yeah.
But I'm like a massive advocate for being childlike and having a spirit of like wonder, discovery.
Of course.
Always asking questions, always seeing things with childlike eyes. Like you see a flower and you're like, oh my goodness, it's like so pretty. And I don't think that's childish or that's immature.
No, it's not immature.
No.
But I think there are parts of cottagecore which are immature fantasies. I want to go back to a time when there are no responsibilities.
Yes,
essentially.
and I don't think that's
a good thing.
I don't think that's a good thing. That's why this is why we were saying we're trying to find a part of the internet or like an aesthetic that like kind of is in line with ours, just to learn more about it even, or find that community to talk to. And we kind of stumbled across this. We're like, maybe like it's a desire for simple living, no internet is like the biggest thing that we kind of are a fan of. Then it's just like people need to have responsibilities. They need to, like, if you want to live in the land, you have to be planting and working. Or
yeah, I mean, that's been a continued difficulty for us, is finding a community online which is similar, because those people aren't online. Yeah. And the groups that we have found have been, once I do a little bit of digging, often politically motivated.
Yes.
Like we learned about the Unabomber this week. That was fun.
Yeah.
Not really, but we read the manifesto, and it was kind of a treatise against the industrial world. And the manifesto itself, you read it and you're like, okay, it's quite extreme. Yes. He was against all things industrial. He just wanted to live off the land, not even in communities. He thought the modern world was terrible. It was not built around us as humans anymore, and that we were kind of shaping ourselves around the modern world rather than vice versa. That was kind of the crux of it, which you read that and you say, okay, yeah, that seems correct. But he was also incredibly politically motivated. He thought that the left was the villains were the villains, basically, and there was no room for leftism in this idealized primal world, which he wanted to return to.
Yeah.
And obviously he took that to deadly extremes. And
he was incredibly, he was an extreme right-leaning person.
Yeah.
I didn't read too much into it, but wasn't he just super racist against anyone who was, or did I make that up?
I don't remember. I don't remember, but you're probably misconstruing it with the other things which we found online, which were every time I find an Instagram page or some kind of online community which seems, okay, these guys are about tradition and getting off the internet and living a simpler life and living off the land and being outside and all these nice things. And that's often how it kind of presents itself. But then since I've been, what would you say, don't want to take anything for granted, read a little bit further into it, and I'm like, oh, this is actually kind of a white supremacist page or anything like that.
Yeah. That's almost always the case when we find
it's happened
Instagram
many
page
times
about oh, you need to get outside, be more connected with the land. It's we hate everyone else.
Yeah,
you
see
it
on the surface.
Why are these like this?
On the surface, it's okay, and then I get curious and I scroll a little bit, and I get suspicious is the word. I scroll a little bit further down, I read through the hashtags, and there was one, it was 3 years ago, they accidentally put some hashtags in which were super racist or something. I was like, aha, these guys. But the problem is groups like this often don't want to wear that outwardly. No. So they kind of do it in a
more subliminal way.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
we just wanted to distance ourselves from that, I think.
Yeah. Because we were worried. We were or I was worried. I was if we're talking about this, I don't want people to think we're even remotely connected with
the problem with those people is that, or the problem with the whole lack of communities like this is that those people lump everything about modernity together as it's all bad.
Yeah.
Everything social, everything, what would you say, demographic. It often manifests as racism and, idealism for a time when women couldn't vote and things like that.
Yeah.
And we're like, no, the social change was pretty good.
They were very good. I mean, there's no more.
No, I mean, because the internet's included in that.
Yeah.
It's the social changes, some parts of it were pretty bad, but most parts of it were pretty good. Most people-based, human rights-based things were good. But there are things which are bad about it.
About the change, the modern world?
Yeah.
Which is really, in our eyes, it's essentially environmental degradation, mental health degradation, breaking down of relationships
and technology.
With people. Yeah.
That's the biggest thing.
Yeah, but they don't have to be lumped with
social change
and I don't know why people have to
diversity.
Do that. It's this.
It's very frustrating for us.
It is very frustrating. Anyway, just wanted to mention that because it's kind of weighing on me as we were doing this episode. I saw a good quote about cottagecore on one of the articles I was reading.
Go for it.
And it said, cottagecore offers a vision of domestic bliss without servitude in the traditional binary framework.
Okay.
Because I saw it and I was like, is this misogynistic? Is this some kind of because it's essentially all women.
Oh, right. We didn't mention that.
Yeah.
It's an incredibly feminine aesthetic and group.
Yeah. It's dominantly the people participating in these online groups they identify as women. And
almost all women, and there's a big overlap with LGBTQ online communities.
Yes.
Which I found very interesting.
Yeah. And that's why I've read that quote, and I've seen a ton of other quotes from people who are participating in it, and they're saying it's an opportunity to explore these traditionally feminine traits and even activities that are traditionally associated with women, but do it in a safe space where there's no servitude or there's no unbalance, because it's just exclusively women, which are usually more balanced because they're all, they all come from the same place, I guess.
Yeah, it just means we can do these feminine things without being told to.
Yes. And I looked into something else because I was kind of curious about I always try and, when I'm looking at something from a traditionally, because you can say, oh, this thing is traditionally feminine or this thing is traditionally masculine, but I like to look at the different yin and yang elements. So it's yin is female, but it's also a massive other list of things. So I like to look at try and use the other words to describe it instead of using the word female.
Okay.
So, and you know how with yin and yang there's always a little bit of yin in the yang and so on?
Sure.
So I went through the list of characteristics. So yin is female, night, passive, negative, earth, softness, water, slowness. This is just a list of adjectives. And I underlined all of the ones that applied to cottagecore. Mm-hmm. And there were definitely more yin, but there were a ton of yang principles as well. So it's not an exclusively...
Such as
sunshine, producing, positive, and brightness were the 4 from yang. And then there were probably like 8 yin principles.
Okay.
So I don't know, I thought that was kind of cool to try and find, just use different language to describe it, because I don't like associating things like this with just femininity, because I don't think it needs to be.
No.
Yeah.
But kind of by its own admission, it is. From the femininity thing, what bothers me about it, I don't think it's hateful, but there is kind of an assumption, as you just said, it's in a world where it's all female, so everyone's equal. It's kind of this assumption that men there would ruin it, because then there'd be a power imbalance or something like that.
Yeah.
So I don't think that kind of escapism is good, and I do think it comes from, what would you say, a social vilification of masculinity?
I think so.
So I think it's kind of escaping from, this is not to, what would you say, downplay the issue of toxic masculinity, misogyny, sexism in the workplace, or the kind of struggles that women feel in relationships, and the kind of, I'm guessing there's a lot of difficulties engaging in traditionally feminine activities. It's not to downplay that, but I do think it at least partially comes out of a overblown social critique of masculinity.
Yeah, that's well put.
Yeah.
But that's just like modern feminism isn't anti-men, it's just pro-equality. And this might be a little bit too far, like it might be a little bit anti-men, but I don't think it has to be, because I think...
Well, I just think it's a safe space.
Yeah.
It's where, everyone can indulge in fantasies of baking and soft animals, and there's no troubles.
Yeah.
And I don't think, generally, I don't like indulging in those kind of visions.
Yeah.
I think they're okay a little bit. This is what I said. We made a post on Instagram about Animal Crossing, because it's just that. It's just nice things that you can people get addicted to and play for hours a day. And I suppose video games in a way are like that all around, but Animal Crossing superficially is very much like that. And we said in the caption, it's cool if you play it a little bit just to kind of take inspiration from this lifestyle or something, but don't get sucked into it, and always remember that it's not real life.
Yeah, that's really important.
Same with Cottagecore, I would say.
Yeah.
Look at a couple pictures and say, man, I want to live there one day, but then maybe, I don't know, make a plan to live there one day.
Yeah, print them off.
Yeah.
Post them on your wall. I like it because I feel like it's the first time I've found something online that like articulates what I've been feeling towards. I listed all the movies that I loved growing up and that I've discovered even recently that I loved the aesthetics of, but I never like put my finger on it. I always knew it was like this eclectic kind of aesthetic, but it's kind of cool to now find this community and be able to maybe, if I want a recipe, I could go on and there might be a discussion about like, here's this gluten-free bread recipe, here's how we kind of worked it out and made it work. So I think taking inspiration from the internet is always a good thing, but just taking it as inspiration, not getting sucked in and just not actually doing anything in the physical world. Because I used to do that a lot on Pinterest. I would just start like
Pinterest is another good example.
And pinning, and then I'd be on there for like 4 hours and I would never actually bake anything or draw anything.
I do it on YouTube, but I think the way for me anyway, the way we convince ourselves that it's okay and that it's active is that it seems educational to an extent.
Yeah.
I'm learning about this lifestyle.
Yeah.
But really it's not that.
No. So I feel like even just setting a limit, like that's what I try to do when I'm on really any website. It's just like you can go on for like 15 minutes and then do something with what you learned.
Are you going to list the list?
It's very long, but yeah, I'll list the list of movies and also songs. So the first one that came to my mind was Penelope. It's a 2006 movie. It's about a girl who she's like has a pig nose or something, and she's like trying to find love, but then it's kind of like a Beauty and the Beast story.
Interesting.
Yeah, but it's terrariums, they have chickens, their kitchen is just the most fantastic thing in the world. She has a library, a piano room. It's super cottagecore, and that's 2006, and I've always loved it, and I feel like it's kind of maybe because the people in the cottagecore aesthetic are our age, so I feel like it might be kind of a formative, they watched this.
True.
Then it's kind of stuck with them. And then more modern, there's Little Women. The Holiday, which is another 2006 movie. It's just like a love story, but half of it is set in a cottage in Ireland, and it's just gorgeous. She's reading. There's no internet there. And then she switches lives with another girl who goes to like LA. And in LA, it's all like internet, super fast life. So interesting. I think that kind of formed me a little bit. Then Nanny McPhee, Paddington, anything by Wes Anderson. There's this kind of eclectic aesthetic about it that I think it's not explicitly cottagecore because a lot of these aren't super magic besides, I guess, Nanny McPhee and Penelope. But I think it's just kind of that eclectic aesthetic that has inspired people of our generation to be the ones bringing cottagecore to the forefront.
You said it was a super long list.
Well, it is. I just didn't want to keep...
You can list them off, maybe just say them.
Okay. I said Lord of the Rings, Doctor Who, Babe, Ella Enchanted, Stuart Little, Harry Potter, Call Me By Your Name, The Holiday, Little Women, Pride and Prejudice, anything Studio Ghibli, and Penelope.
Right.
And then for music, it's just like really any of the scores from those movies. And then a lot of Debussy, Chopin, Liszt, Ravel.
Right, or classical because we don't want lyrics which date it, right?
Yes.
Because it's a kind of timeless, ambiguous feeling.
Yeah, and the Sufjan Stevens, we've been listening to a bit of him to prepare for this, and you were saying he makes a ton of references to ancient Greece.
Yeah, I find it funny because it'll be like a folk song about how sad he feels, and then he'll just mention some obscure Egyptian hero, like a river spirit, and I'm like, what? Okay.
Yeah, so he's a pretty timeless in his lyrics. Yeah.
The ones that I listed that I just see are more characteristic of it for people who are maybe still not 100% sure what this is that we've been talking about for half an hour.
Yeah.
Is Anne of Green Gables, right? That seems quite
perfect.
central to it. And you mentioned Lord of the Rings, but it's specifically the Shire from Lord of the Rings. So that music, that kind of hominess, they're just walking around in the very green grass, tiny round doors, tiny objects, everything's small, the people are small and
eating
hairy.
8 meals a day.
Yeah, and Animal Crossing. Yeah, there's a lot of food is very central to it as well, right?
Yeah, it is.
And I listed, I kind of listed for me some of the smaller things. I wouldn't say I'm especially cottagecore because I don't like, what would you say, daintiness?
You don't like things like...
Oh yeah, I don't like...
clutter.
I don't like coziness.
Yes.
Or daintiness or small metal things, which are kind of also inherent because there's a lot of drinking tea.
Yes.
And spoons.
You don't like those.
But the ones that I thought were kind of similar, which I used to watch as a kid, were Little Bear,
yes.
Franklin, and the Berenstain Bears.
Oh, yeah.
Because all of those were just idealized little towns in the woods. Some of them, they live in tree houses. They're always walking around or biking around on the paths by themselves and hanging out with their friends, and there's no internet.
Yeah. The best example, I'd say, for like aesthetic-wise, Angelina Ballerina and Frog and Toad.
Frog and Toad is a great one,
It's the best, because I wanted to find a list of movies expecting to find the ones I listed, and then there were just 3. It just said Studio Ghibli, Angelina Ballerina, Frog and Toad.
So the funny thing is, these are all kids' media, right?
Yeah.
So I do think that kind of, what would you say, juvenile or infantile escapism is at the heart of it, and I don't think that's good.
I don't think it's good either. That's why I tried to bring in more age-appropriate movies, I guess.
The word infantilization I learned this week, and that seems to be a great summary of some of our biggest gripes with the way people in society are going, including ourselves in that, obviously, is that it's like, well, everyone kind of acts like they're 8 all the time, but not in the good ways, just in the kind of unwillingness to take responsibility or things like that. So that's not a good thing. Childlike wonder, appreciation, and especially, what would you say, their sense of time and living in the moment, that's a great thing. But when it extends into a wider lifestyle... Yeah,
just like you don't want to do work.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
I think it's just super prevalent. Like I've been...
No, that is true. Yeah. It's like, no, I don't want to do any work or eat my vegetables.
It's like...
That's basically how it is.
You need to. Like,
and that seems to be extending, I think, almost politically as well. It's like, why do I have to work full time?
Yeah.
So that's something to keep an eye on, and it doesn't seem good. Definitely the core of cottagecore.
Yeah.
Oh, one other thing I wanted to mention is that the things tend to be written or shared or kind of play acted in those communities in like a role-playing style.
Okay.
Role-playing in like a period style. So people talk and post as if they were from living in that time period.
Oh, okay.
In a little cursive font or something. And I think that's, again, something of note and something childlike. A very, what would you say, oblique escape from the modern world. I'm just going to act
playing dress up.
Playing dress up.
Yeah.
But you're in your 30s.
Yeah, I don't think that's good. I think playing dress up is great. Like, if you want to take fashion inspiration from any time in history, do it, but just
I think
you have to be present. People aren't present anymore.
It's turning a blind eye to it's turning a blind eye to modern issues.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of saying, "Oh, I don't like those. I don't like living like this. So let's leave."
Yeah, basically.
Or let's pretend I don't live here in this time.
Yeah, one article I read was just all about that. It was like, basically, these people they don't like the impending doom of the environment degrading beyond repair.
So they just escape it, right?
They just escape it, and they're like, yeah, we're going to go live in the woods.
It reminds me of that kind of weird trend of, well, maybe not a trend, but a weird phenomena that I've seen online a few times of adults dressing up as babies or dressing up as kids.
Yeah.
And it happened a little bit in my high school as well. You know, there'd always be that group of kids who pretend they're cats or babies. And I think that's, first and foremost, very sad, because it's like, not sad as like a value judgment, just sad as in it, like it makes me sad that adults are so desperate for escape or comfort or something that they kind of...
no other alternative.
Yeah, return to the most kind of basic view of the world.
Yeah.
I think it's something that's incredibly modern and timely. I don't think there would be another time in history where people would be doing that significantly.
Yeah. It seems that people are...
And I think this is relevant to cottagecore as well.
Yeah. I think it's like taking it a little bit too far. We need to say you find this aesthetic and you say, this is great, like the world needs to be more appreciative of the simple things, the mundane tasks. But then just apply it to your life. I'm living in an apartment in a city. I'm not living in the woods, but that doesn't mean I can not go outside for a walk, go outside to read my book. Doesn't mean I can't bake, own less, live a simpler life. Try and apply those things to your situation. It's inspiration for a reason. It's not...
Well said. And then do it more and do it more and do it more, and then build a log cabin and do it there.
Yeah, if you want to.
It's like, that seems fine to me, but the substitute for actually changing one's life seems to be just pretending to do it online, and I don't like that at all.
No, because it's not doing any positive change for society, the environment.
This is why we say there's, or for yourself, this is why we say there's a good and bad to cottagecore.
Yes.
So I think we outlined pretty well the good and bad.
I think so.
One thing I wanted to mention, quite unrelated, was we had a pretty good conversation the other day when I mentioned that my mind's been really scattered lately. We kind of touched on it when we talked about our social media usage, and that I've been finding it hard to retain information and to remember things and basically to learn. Yeah. And you said the most worrying sentence I've ever heard when you said, yeah, I've been feeling that for a couple of years now. And I thought, oh man, a couple of years. And that kind of worried me, because we always hear you reach a point where you can't learn as well in your early 20s.
You don't believe it.
And I never believed it. I was like, yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
But now I'm like, oh no, am I reaching that?
Yeah.
Because that would be quite devastating.
Yeah. So we decided we're going to try and learn. Well, you haven't learned French.
I'd love to learn French.
So try and learn French.
The time it takes is so rough.
Yeah. But the thing is, we're going to move somewhere in a couple of years that we're going to need to know another language.
But we decided not to be defeatist about that.
Yes.
We said, okay then, if this is something that's happening to us, let's try and stop it in its tracks and reverse it so that we can return to a childlike state of absorption where we can learn everything. Because I remember in middle school, we'd learn like new topics every day.
Yeah.
And you just retain them.
Yeah.
And not even in school, but just elsewhere, reading online. I'd be like, oh, okay, cool. And then I just internalize it really quickly and remember it. And lately I've just been, so for instance, if I'm trying to read, even something pretty basic or fictional, not even nonfiction, I have to reread things a few times, and even then I don't remember it so well. And I really think that's coincided with my being online a lot more. Yeah. Because I think I'm tending to read things, even when I'm consciously trying to read, like reading a book, I tend to skim them as if I'm online. Yeah. Like I've kind of internalized that habit, which is rough. I mean, I don't think anything about browsing online is good for us, the way we do it, carelessly, which is why we've been trying to not do it so much.
Yes, we were going to the library a lot more, getting books, physical things.
Yeah, the quarantine is also not helping, because I can't go to the library anymore. And so now I kind of have to work and learn in the same place that I goof around.
Yeah.
So that's not a good thing.
Yeah, it's like trying to study on the couch where you also play video games and watch movies. It's kind of hard.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, but I'm sure we'll adapt to it with time.
No, we don't want to adapt to it. We want to reverse that. Get rid of the distractions.
Yeah, get rid of, but I mean, we'll adapt our surroundings to be more conducive to learning.
Good point.
Throughout this isolation period.
Well said.
But yeah, I think I've been trying to read more, because I know reading and learning languages are like the two best ways to strengthen your
And reading
mind.
A book.
Yes, not online, because as you said, skimming is just how you read online. Because I think it's because it's, you can go back and reference it if you want to, but you never do.
I don't know what it is. It's something about the screen. It's something about not actually touching the words as you do in a book.
Yeah.
A part of me dies every single time I sign up for a course and they say the textbook's online, and I'm like, no, I don't want to read a textbook online.
Yeah.
So I never do those readings.
Mm-hmm.
It's quite miserable. Any final thoughts on Cottagecore?
No, I think it's pretty good, what we said.
Right. Use it as some kind of inspiration. Don't spend too long on it. Don't let it turn you into a child, and don't let it absolve you of all responsibilities of having to live in the modern world.
Yes.
So next week we are doing a cool kind of quiz episode where we'll be quizzing each other on
our knowledge,
our wide breadth of environmental knowledge and other types of knowledge, and hopefully exposing how little we know about everything.
Yes, and then learning something as we go, because we're going to be looking up the answers as we go.
Awesome.
Yeah, cool. So I hope everyone enjoyed this podcast. If you're interested in any of our content, you're welcome to follow us on Instagram to check out. Just to remind you to get off Instagram is basically what all our posts do, or remind you of new episodes. It's @the_environmental. We also release new episodes on Spotify, SoundCloud, and Apple Podcasts every Monday.
Yeah. Have a great day, everyone. Stay safe.